What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the Dose Media Network YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Joey, and in today's video, I will be going over the DraftKings Week 3 main slate from a cash game perspective. So if you're a tournament bro, this video probably isn't for you. This is for the cash game grinders. What players are going to be chalk? What players do I think are good chalk / bad chalk? And if you're a longtime listener / viewer, you know that we originated with DraftKings content. We've kind of moved away from that this season. We're more so focusing on props, but I thought it'd be fun to go over this Week 3 main slate. I think it's a better slate than Week 1 and Week 2, so I will be going position by position and highlighting some guys that I think will be popular and that I will either be playing or fading for Week 3 in cash games. So without further ado, let's take a look at the slate. Just a quick editor's note. This video is recorded on Tuesday. It's getting posted on Thursday. So some of the information may be a little outdated. Like now we have confirmation that Nick Chubb is out for the season. But all of my takes still stand in this video. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video. And if you're interested in joining our premium Discord, the link for that is down below in the description. But let's get back to the video. All right, so I think this slate is a little bit better than Week 1 and Week 2, like I mentioned at the top. We have some teams with some very high implied team totals. The Chiefs lead the slate with a 30 implied team total at home against the putrid Bears. The Vikings and Chargers game looks like it's going to be one of the chalkiest games on the slate, especially from a tournament perspective. I could see that game's ownership getting absolutely out of control. The Jags have a good team total. The Dolphins have a good team total. Just pretty much every good team has a high team total in this spot. So from a quarterback perspective, and in terms of the chalk, I think the chalk is going to be at the top of the player pool. I think Mahomes, Allen, Lamar Jackson should be healthy and ready to go, are going to soak up some ownership in cash games. And I do think it is correct to go to either Lamar, Josh Allen, or Patrick Mahomes. Their teams are in very good spots, high implied team totals. Obviously, these three guys can break fantasy football, and they could separate from the quarterback position in which, some guys in the bottom just really can't. But there are some viable options that I think could potentially gain steam and gain popularity as the week goes on. I could see Trevor Lawrence at 6,800 being one of those guys that gets steamed a little. I know he was kind of popular in Week 2 in that Chiefs game and had a complete dud, and he hasn't been good from a fantasy perspective, but they are playing the Texans. This seems like a bounce back spot for the Jaguars, and the Texans are quietly becoming one of the most pass-heavy teams in the NFL this year, and CJ Stroud had a very good game in Week 2, and a lot of people might not be on that, and I think this game does have potential to be a decently high-scoring game. And at 6,800, Trevor Lawrence does look kind of interesting. I think Russell Wilson at 5,900 is okay. Russell Wilson is actually like a top 5 fantasy quarterback so far to start the season, and a 30-point game in Week 2 obviously helps, and it's kind of misconstrued because of the Hail Mary that they got at the end of the game, and that boosted his numbers quite a bit. But at 5,900 in that game environment against Miami, I think the Broncos are going to have to throw the ball, and they're going to have to put up points if they want to compete in that game. Some cheap options that I don't mind. CJ Stroud, as I just mentioned, the Texans are becoming quietly one of the most pass-heavy teams in the league. 5,300 for Stroud coming off of a 25-point game against the Jaguars, and a good game environment looks okay to me. Gardner Minshew potentially, probably not. Desmond Ridder at 5K I think could potentially get ownership, especially at Detroit. This is a game that, potentially could be a little bit more high scoring, especially if Detroit gets up and Atlanta is forced to push the pace a little bit. And Desmond Ridder is coming off of a 22-point game. So if we get 15 or 16 points out of Desmond Ridder at 5K, you'll take it. But my lean in cash this week is to get up to one of Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. I want to be in this high-end tier for a quarterback. These are just the guys that could separate. I think Justin Herbert's in the best game environment, but Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar all have higher ceilings than Herb. And if I had to choose right now, I think I'm leaning either Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson just two superstar quarterbacks and two superstar fantasy quarterbacks. Mahomes obviously in a great spot, and I expect the Chiefs to score a lot of touchdowns. I just don't really like the pass catchers, and I think the Chiefs are going to struggle on offense this year. So Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson are definitely my preferred cash game quarterbacks. Moving on to the running back position, I mean, we've seen it so far this year. There's been so many injuries to running backs. Running backs have already suffered, season-long ending injuries. Potentially Nick Chubb is the next. J.K. Dobbins. Other players such as Aaron Jones and Austin Eckler have already missed time. David Montgomery got hurt. Jamal Williams got hurt last night. Running back is just a brutal position, and I want to spend as little capital, frankly, as possible on DraftKings each and every single week. So if we take a look at DraftKings, I'm automatically scrolling down. That's what you should be doing. I don't think it's correct to allocate, 8 or 8,500 to the running back position just because it's so volatile. But I don't mind Tony Pollard in that positive game script. I think you're locking in 18 plus points with Tony Pollard. Bijan Robinson, same thing. I think Bijan is a clear-cut smash to finish as the RB2 in fantasy football. He's had 2 games already with 20-plus DraftKings points. They're using him as a passer. He's obviously the most explosive player on the Atlanta team, and the touchdowns haven't even came yet. So Bijan at 7,800 and Tony Pollard at 8K are the only players at the top of the pool that you should be considering for cash. You're skipping over Eckler. You're skipping over ETN, Aaron Jones, Ramondre. The roles just aren't that good right now for those guys. And the price tags just don't make too much sense, in my opinion. We're going to talk about the biggest lock of week 3, or the biggest chalk, I should say. I would say he's probably a lock. But Jerome Ford at 4,800 is going to be the week 3 chalk running back play of the week, similar to Josh Kelly, who was 5K last week against Tennessee. And it's funny that it's the same matchup. Tennessee is the best rushing defense in the NFL. And Jerome Ford now, with Nick Chubb out, is going to be locked into a starting role. We saw he had 19 touches in week 2 against Pittsburgh, and he was involved as a passer. He caught 1 receiving touchdown, and at 4,800, he is going to be the stone chalk. Now, do I think he has some bust potential? Absolutely. It's a tough matchup, and the Browns offense, quite frankly, has been literal dog shit. So there is a ton of risk with Jerome Ford. Can you fade him in cash? I mean, you can. You could definitely galaxy brain off of it, but he's just going to project so well, and the price tag is so cheap, and playing a 4,800 running back that's going to get you 15 touches is good process no matter the matchup or how you feel about a certain player. There are times where I will fade a chalk running back especially, but when they're under 5K, the fade becomes exponentially harder to do, especially if Ford were to go off in this game against Tennessee. So Jerome Ford at 4,800 is a lock in cash. He's going to be played in pretty much every single lineup, and it's only Tuesday. So that means we have to figure out who is going to be in our RB2. And I think it really is a toss-up, and this is going to really depend on projections and what people that make projections have to say. I could see Tony Pollard or Bijan being the RB2 that most people are going to gravitate towards. I think Kenneth Walker will have ownership at 6,200, and I wouldn't mind playing him. I'm not the biggest Kenneth Walker fan. He's pretty much a zero in the pass game, in my opinion at least, and the Seahawks offensive line has been absolutely brutal. And really, you're relying on big runs and big touchdown runs from Kenneth Walker to get you there, especially on a full PPR site. He's not the best play, but he's definitely not the worst. So I think Kenneth Walker is definitely in play for the RB2. Other than that, there's not much that I'm seeing. Josh Kelly will be in consideration if Austin Eckler were to miss again this week. We don't have an update on his status, but if Austin Eckler is out, the RBs that you are going to be playing in cash is Jerome Ford and Josh Kelly. It's just that simple. That's just how DFS works in 2023. You're playing the cheap chalk running backs that are going to get 15 to 20 touches. And, you live with the results at that point. Other than that, there's really not many running backs that I would have in my pool. I think my cash game running back pool would consist of Tony Pollard, Bijan Robinson, Joshua Kelly if Austin Eckler is out, and Jerome Ford. That's about it. Jerome Ford is a stone lock, and then I think you can go to one of Tony Pollard or Bijan Robinson. My lean there, I think I would prefer Bijan at 7,800. I just think the game has potential to stay closer, whereas the Cowboys are obviously going to dominate Arizona. Moving on to wide receiver. Wide receiver is obviously the position that you want to target in fantasy football in 2023. Running backs get hurt like crazy. Running backs are in committees, blah, 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 all this other bullshit. Wide receivers are the position to target. And there's a plethora of good options this week that I think are going to be in cash game consideration. Justin Jefferson at 9,300. I don't care his price tag. His role is just absurd. 25 targets through 2 weeks, 27 and 28 DraftKings points in back-to-back weeks. He's just an absolute monster, and the matchup is obviously very good. Same goes for Tyreek Hill at 9K. Tyreek Hill is just an absolute machine. 24 targets through 2 weeks, so he's averaging 2 targets, 3 touchdowns on the season. The ceiling is absurd. I think I would prefer Justin Jefferson, but if you want to play Tyreek Hill over JJ, that's fine. Diggs kind of in that same tier. I would have him a little bit of a tier below. He just doesn't see the target volume that these guys see on a weekly basis. 20 targets through 2 weeks, 1 tutty. Can't go wrong with Diggs. The top of the range, obviously stone cold smashes in full PPR. The mid-range isn't too exciting. I think there could potentially be some chalkier wide receivers from this range. I think people might gravitate towards Jordan Addison. I mean, he's only seen 11 targets through 2 weeks, but the big play ability is there. The game environment is there, and we know that the Vikings are going to throw the ball at an absurd rate. He's obviously third in the pecking order behind JJ and TJ Hawkinson, but at 5,500, I think Addison is okay. He's definitely not a lock by any stretch. Michael Thomas is interesting at 5,300 in this mid-range. Chris Olave is 7K. So there's a $1,700 difference between Chris Olave and Michael Thomas as it currently stands. But Chris Olave only has 4 more targets than Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas has seen 8+ targets in each game so far. And at 5,300, I think he's kind of a little underpriced for his current role. Obviously, the upside isn't what it used to be with MT, but from a target perspective, I definitely think he's okay. I think Drake London is going to project well in week 3 against Detroit. Like I mentioned before, I'm kind of higher on this Atlanta-Detroit game, and they kind of made it a point to get Drake London the ball after throwing up the donut in week 1. If we go down, though, I think the chalk player that people are going to gravitate towards for salary relief is Tank Dell, 3,600. Tank Dell was Texans' leading receiver last week in terms of targets in his second NFL career game. If you watched Tank Dell in the preseason, or if you've watched him so far in his NFL career, Tank Dell is a very explosive player. He's a great route runner, and he knows how to get open, and he feeds in those intermediate zones that CJ Stroud can hit. And this connection is only going to get better between Tank and CJ Stroud. And I just want to mention it again. The Texans have been one of the most pass-heavy teams in the NFL to start the season. And at 3,600, I think Tank Dell and the potential opportunity that he is going to see makes him a solid cash game play. So at 3,600, I think he's the best pay-down wide receiver. I think he's going to be a little bit chalky as well. Besides Tank Dell, I don't think there's any other cheap wide receivers that I would go to. I think he's the lowest you go in cash games. The mid-range is kind of disgusting, and the wide receiver position in general isn't great this week. I mean, I would consider Mike Williams cash game viable at 6K. He had 13 targets last week, and you know that the Chargers are going to throw the ball just as much as the Vikings will. And if Austin Eckler is out, that obviously boosts Mike Williams' ceiling and floor a little bit. So Mike Williams at 6K, I still think he's a little bit underpriced even after a price increase. So I would consider Mike Williams cash game viable. Amari Cooper at home against Tennessee. I mean, he's the Browns' leading receiver. Solid game against Pittsburgh on Monday night, 5,700. He's cash game viable as well. So I think my pool would include these 3 wide receivers plus Mike Williams and Amari Cooper, Michael Thomas, and Drake London. Though that would be my cash game pool at wide receiver for an early look. Moving on to the worst position in the NFL, tight end. It's another disgusting week. I mean, let me just pull up these prices. Gosh. There's really no, top guys that I'm interested in. I'm not playing Travis Kelce at 7,200 ever in cash. That's just something that I personally believe in. I'm not playing a high-priced tight end in cash. Okay, it's just never happening. I want to save salary, and I think the best or one of the best salary savers is Dalton Kincaid at 3,400. You're going to get 4 to 5 targets out of Kincaid, and he has the ability to break explosive plays off. Other than that, there's really not much that I would consider. Chig is okay at 3,200. The price tag is cheap. Hunter Henry at 4,100. I mean, you see it rocking the Patriots hoodie. He's going to get 5 to 6 targets a week, and he's the overall tight end 1 on the season as it stands right now. TJ Hawkinson is a target monster. He's going to be a catch monster in this Vikings offense. They used him at the goal line in week 2 against Philly, and it's another plus matchup for TJ Hawkinson. So at 6,500, I think you can't play him in cash, but this is my tournament take. I would pivot to TJ Hawkinson in tournaments above Mark Andrews and Kelce. Mark Andrews at 6K, he's underpriced. If you want to go there in cash, I think that's the highest that I would go. But other than that, you're paying down at tight end. You're playing a Dalton Kincaid. You're playing a Logan Thomas or somebody in that range. It really doesn't fucking matter who you play at tight end because all of these guys are pretty much 5 to 6 point guys, and you're not going to win or lose your week at tight end. So just pick the cheapest guy that fits in your lineups. That's my advice. So that was an early first look at the DraftKings slate. Definitely need to do a little bit more dissecting. We need to get more news, more information, and ultimately come to a play the best plays lineup. And I think that will include most of the players that I discussed in this video. So if you appreciate this content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like, all that good stuff. And we will be back with another video sometime, probably talking about some props that we like. We will see you guys then.